Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of handling checkout with Deno, Fresh, and Stripe. In the first part, we created the UI and components for our home route. In this video, we'll complete our cart by allowing users to see, add, and remove items from their cart. Let's get started. We want to have a way to manage the state of our cart. There's multiple ways to do that. I've decided to try out signals and local storage to avoid losing state on refresh. So let's first create a file in our utils folder and call that state.typescript. This will hold the logic for initializing our state, retrieving our state, and modifying it. We'll be able to easily make use of it inside our different routes and components afterwards. If you want to learn a bit more about it, I mainly followed a blog post by Craig Daramus on using signals in Fresh, which you can find in the description. So we'll first start by importing the signal class as well as the signal function, which we'll make use of. We also need our item interface, since we will receive an item object and add those to our cart. We've got two function types. Add to cart function, which takes an item and returns void. This will basically add items to our cart. And the second one is remove from cart function that takes the item ID, which is a number, and returns void. It'll remove items from our cart. I'll also create an interface to represent our cart items. I don't really care about the image in our item object, and I needed to add a new field to represent the quantity. Whenever we get an item object, we'll convert it into a cart item, and that's what we'll add to our cart. Next, we'll also export a type to represent our state. This will hold the cart, which is a signal of list of cart items. It'll also have the add to cart function as well as the remove from cart function. Next, we create our function that will initialize our state. We first check local storage for any cart data that might already be stored there. If there's something, we will parse that into a list of cart items. Otherwise, we just initialize an empty cart list. We'll then create our add to cart function. First thing is we'll check if there's already an existing item based off of the ID of the new item we're adding. If yes, we want to increment the quantity of that item. I also need to reassign the cart value to itself. Otherwise, the app wasn't really picking up that an update occurred and it wasn't updating the components. Might be a better way to do this, but it did the trick for me. Now, if there's no existing item, we want to add the new item to the list. And finally, we also want to update our local storage with the new value. Next function is the remove from cart. It behaves similarly to add to cart. We will first check if we already have an existing item. If found, we want to check if the quantity is bigger than 1. In the case that it is, we will decrement the quantity of that object and do the same trick by reassigning the cart to value to itself. Otherwise, we want to remove that item from our cart. To do so, we'll just use the filter by returning all the items that don't match the ID that we're looking for. This will return all the items minus the ones with that ID. Finally, same as the add to cart, we update our local storage with the new cart value. We can now return our app state object, and at the end, just export the create app state function so that we can use it in our routes and components. Nice. Now let's start using our app state in the app. If we go to our item component under islands, we currently have a button to add to cart that does nothing. So let's make use of our app state to add items to our cart. We'll first import our create app state. Then we'll create a constant state. And on click, we'll call the add to cart function from our state, passing it the current item that we're looking at. If we hit save and try that out, we can see that when we click add to cart, nothing happens. But if we inspect our application under local storage, we can see that our cart has a list that's populated. And whenever we add something to it, quantity gets updated. So we're at 4 for shirt. Now we're at 7. Great. So I'd like to have the navbar link for the cart displaying how many items we currently have in it. So let's create a component for that. So we'll go inside of our island folder and we'll create a new component called cart counter. This component will basically just represent a red badge telling us how many items are in our cart. We'll first import the create app state. We'll then export a component called cart counter. We'll create the state constant by using create app state. And with it, we can get access to the cart list from our state and get the sum of all the quantities by using reduce. So we'll simply sum all the quantities together to get the actual count of how many items are in our cart. Then we can return our JSX element. We'll check if the count is bigger than 0. We want to return a span which has a red background, white text, rounded, with the count value. Otherwise, if the count is equal to 0, we simply return an empty span. Now we can make use of our cart counter inside of our navbar. So if we head over to our nav component, at the bottom, right under the cart text, we can add a new component and make sure to import our island component. If we hit save and go to our browser, we should now see a red badge displaying how many items are in our cart. So if I click on new ones, it gets automatically updated. This is all great, but we also want to be able to see our cart. So let's create a new cart component. Under our island folder, we'll create a new file called cart. Like for the other components, we'll first import the create app state. Then we'll export our cart component. We'll create our state constant based off of the create app state. And we'll return our JSX element. We'll create a div with some margin and padding and centered text. And inside of that, we'll have a table to represent our products. The heading fields for our table will be the product name, the price, quantity, and an action column. In the body, we will map over our cart values. Using the state, we can access our cart list and map over it to get all the items. For each item, we will display the item name, the price times the quantity to get the total price for that specific item. We'll also display the actual quantity, and then we'll have a button which on click we'll call the remove from cart function from our state, passing it the item ID, which will remove that item from our state. If the quantity is bigger than 1, it will simply decrement the quantity, also updating the price as it's doing it. And if the quantity is 1, it will remove the item completely. We are also going to add another row after all this to represent our checkout button. Currently, it won't do anything, but once we will integrate with Stripe, we will make use of this button to start our checkout session. So our component is ready, but we don't have the cart route set up. So we can head over to our routes and create a new file called route.tsx. We will first export the nav component, followed by our new cart component. We'll then export our cart page function and return the JSX element. We will first display the nav component, followed by our cart component. And that's all we need for our cart route. So if we hit save, head over to our browser. If we make sure to refresh, now when we hit on the cart link, we should now see a table representing all the items that are in our cart. And we can try and remove items from it, so we can see the quantity and price being updated to reflect that items are being removed. And if there's only one quantity for an item, it gets completely removed from our cart. So this completes the cart system. Only one more thing left to do, and that's integrating all this with Stripe so that we can actually proceed to checkout. We'll do this in the next video. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.